Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. We got a great show for you guys today. But before we get into the rundown of today's show, make sure you go to NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. Put in the code DRAFTSEASON23, 20% off your first payment. All of our news, all of our analysis, extra bonus podcasts every single week. 2 of them during the season, 1 of them during the off season. And you help support the show. That's how we put this all out. We are going to get into a ton of great topics today. We're going to go through different draft scenarios in the draft, work on the trade value chart, run through the list of positions, rank them, must, needs, wants, all that and much, much more in today's show. We are coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio, and we are presented by Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey. That is an 86 proof blend with fresh Ponchatoula strawberries blended in New Orleans. It is not for the thin skin. Find it in your favorite bars, restaurants, and grocery stores. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review, BADEAUXlaw.com. And check out our newest sponsor, BetMGM. Go on their website, use the code NO1000, sign up and deposit that in your newly created account. Download the BetMGM app on iOS or Android, or visit betmgm.com. Place your first bet, offer and receive up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. And if that bet loses, your bonus bet will be available once the wager is settled. So they're giving you a free bet. Go on there, sign up. NO1000 is the code. Use that, get locked in. Place a bet on the Saints doing well this season. I don't know, whatever you want to do, but it's a free bet. So you might as well find something with decent odds and take advantage of that. And last but not least, check out our friends, Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Great people doing great stuff for the community. They help us put on the show. So let's get into the show. All right, welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. If you are not yet signed up to NewOrleans.Football, make sure you handle that today. Use the code DRAFTSEASON23, 20% off your first payment. We got a story up there, or going up there today, breaking down how the Saints set their prototypes and what players in the top 100 fit. We've had a pretty good track record over the years of kind of getting the list of players that they're going to draft narrowed down to guys that they actually end up drafting. So make sure you check that out. And we got a whole lot more mock draft coming out later in this week. Our first one came out last week. So make sure you are on the website, and then you get a bonus podcast every week, and then maybe eventually even more bonus podcasts. So make sure you handle that. Mike, how you doing?
Or you can come see us in person next Monday.
Next Monday, Chick-fil-A, West Bank. What's the address?
It's on General de Gaulle and Holiday in Algiers.
What time are we doing that?
We're going to be there from 5:30 to 7.
Yeah.
With the show in the middle, a little meet and greet opportunity. We'll get some live, our guys over there aren't, they don't cheer for us enough. You didn't get the applause sign up.
Yeah. We do got to start getting some clapping. Brandon's got to clap a little bit more.
Yeah, we need more. Or just like the uproarious laughter, like our jokes are too funny. And,
yeah. Like a press conference laugh. Like where somebody says something that's really not funny, but you...
like me during all of Jamal Williams' bits.
The worst thing we encourage them to be like, it's really not that funny. Like in a different setting, it's like,
yeah.
But in that setting, you laugh really hard. All right, so getting into the draft, one of the topics that I'm kind of fixated on right now, because you look at it at 29, and I guess anytime you're picking at 29, you're not going to be overwhelmed by the names, because these aren't the names people are hyping. And I keep looking at it, and I keep trying to figure out, okay, if I were going to trade up, and this is just really a good way to think, because we cover the Saints. So they are thinking about, okay, if we were going to trade up, who would we trade up for and what would it cost? I'm more interested in the value proposition of trading up than maybe the guys that you would specifically trade up for, at least right now at this juncture. So what is the line on too much? Like, what are you...
Right.
Where are you saying, okay, we're not giving up this to get to there?
Well, I think since we both think we're talking about a defensive lineman being such a huge priority, I don't see the guy that, unless, one of the guys that's supposed to be in the top 10 has all of a sudden fallen to 8 9, 10, 11, and the Saints are like, all right, this guy's number 3 on our board. Then all of a sudden you start having those talks about going crazy. But the other guys we're talking about, Lucas Van Ness from Iowa, Miles Murphy from Clemson, like I'm not going into the teens for those guys, I don't think.
I think I would.
I don't know if I feel like those guys are that. But, if they have them as, top 12, top 14 prospects or something, and they're available at 15, 16, 17, then sure, maybe you have to do that. But I'm thinking more, use that 3rd round pick to go. We were talking about, what the recent history shows and what the trade charts say. That maybe gets you up from 29 to 20 or 19 or something like that. I think a move like that, depending on the prospect, I don't want to mess around with a future. I never want to trade a future first again after they played with so much fire that, they almost traded away the 6th pick in this year's draft if they would have lost one more game or something like that. And I don't really want to trade that 40th pick either. So I don't think I want to go any higher than trading away a 3rd rounder.
I almost don't hate the Chris Olave trade. Like, I think it's, you look at this draft, like really JSM might be the only guy that's really like a true 1st round wide receiver in this draft. And Senior Bowl Jim had a tweet about it today, and he was just saying basically like he's talking to teams and that teams just really don't have 1st round grades on wide receivers. And then someone had a chart that came out about the percentage of top 10 players that get signed at wide receiver in free agency, and it's almost at 0. Like the positional value is almost harder to get a wide receiver in free agency than any other position. And I don't know if it was higher than quarterback or not, but I think it was quarterback, wide receiver, and then defensive end on the chart. So that almost ends up being fine. But yeah, top 6, it's like that's insane because you have range for the quarterback and you can trade up for the quarterback.
If you trade a future first, it's impossible to know what the real value is. I mean, some teams have to trade 3 firsts for 1 first, like depending on where you are in the round. You just don't know the actual value of the future
I guess
first. Yeah.
Just aside from just that very specific though, like wide receivers have almost become that. Like they are that.
No, I don't
now.
mind that. Yeah.
Like you have to trade to get your wide receivers in the draft, or you're paying them 20, 25 million a year, or like they're right up there in that cloud with quarterback, wide receiver, and pass rusher now. It's been a major transition for that position, and it makes sense because that's what the league is now. Like you can overcome decent quarterback play with great wide receivers, and you just saw it in Philly. And I think Jalen Hurts developed into that, but I think he was helped along with some of the players he had. And then by the Super Bowl, it was like, oh, he's the man by the end of the season. But I think that you can elevate that. So
I'm okay with it in theory. I mean, obviously it didn't work out with Marcus Davenport a couple years ago. I think the jury's still out on J.C. Horn, but if the Saints had pulled off moving up from 27 to 8 and took Patrick Surtain and traded a future first to do that, that might have felt like a worthy move. The Falcons did it
the
once
other piece
for
of that, the other piece
Julio
of that,
Jones.
I think that cornerback thing is that they very likely might not spend the money on Lattimore.
I don't think they would have. I think that's
the money.
part of why they wanted to do that.
And then you're
year.
investing the money elsewhere. So, I mean, there definitely is.
Depends on the player. But no, I don't think the Saints are in a position where I would like to see them use 2 first-round picks to fill a non-quarterback need to like just put this team over the top. I don't feel like that's where the Saints are right now. I felt a little more, I was very skeptical of them doing that for Marcus Davenport. Actually, that was one of the times I felt like I was.
Is that because of where they're at as a team?
Yeah, I feel like there's more than just one need, and I feel like if they move up from 29 to 10 and get a defensive lineman, I don't think, oh, well, now they're going to the Super Bowl this year. Like, I don't think they're that. I don't think they're one player away. And I also feel like this is a team that could use 3, top 50 picks more than some recent Saints teams we've covered in the past that had a pretty complete roster, and a pretty, especially like we were saying on the members only. We see a lot of positions where they're a year away from having a glaring need.
So is the apprehension about they could be, in your mind, picking 10, 11, or as opposed to where, like, say, 18, you kind of felt like they're picking 25 or later no matter what? Like, is that kind of, is the variance?
Well, that's part of it.
Is the variance creating apprehension?
That's part of the trading a future first-round pick.
Yeah.
Apprehension is you're playing with fire. I mean, your quarterback gets hurt in week 1. There's so many teams that think they're going to be picking 18th, 20th, 24th, 27th. but you could be picking in the top 10 next year. But also, I think this team, I think we said this on the members only, but this team needs to have some good drafts to have a real sustainable future, just like what happened in 2017. I think having 2 first-round picks over the next 2 years, or what they did last year, they did get 2 first-rounders. They got Olave and Penning. I don't want to consolidate my 2 first-rounders into one guy, especially a one non-quarterback in this year's draft class. Like, I don't know that I see the defensive tackle or defensive end or wide receiver that is worth 2 first-round picks this year.
If you could tell me that the player is going to be worth it, I'd be fine with it. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
that always makes the difference.
Yeah, like I would do it because where else are you getting a pass rusher? If they don't go for it, they aren't getting one this year. If they're a playoff team, it's tough to get one next year. I'm more okay with the trade, the light trade. The light trade of, okay, if you take the first and the second maybe to get a pass rusher,
at least it's a known value. The 40th pick is worth the 40th pick.
A fixed asset. Yeah. I know. Even if it was a first and a future second, like maybe. I don't like the 2 first-round picks for the reasons that we just went through, because there is the variance of okay, a couple things go wrong, and in the roster we see it's thin enough that if you get into your depth a little bit, you could be in that top half of the draft. And then when you're in the top half of the draft, you have the ability to make a big move to go up and really make a difference. Yeah. Getting from 29 to top 10 for a top 10 pass rusher, the cost is just way too high for me. Like, typically that's going to cost you next year's first and maybe a third as well. It's way too much. Now, again, if you tell me you're doing that and you just got TJ Watt, fine. Like, go ahead and do it. But that's
always depends on the play.
That's different. The move from 29 to 17, 16, 18, which we talked about on the members only, which you're looking at the trade value chart, 29, you get within 25 points of getting to 17. There's a 25-point difference in the trade value chart. So that's feasible. I would do that if you're giving me a pass rusher and I like the player. But it's tough. I mean, the idea of giving up a first-round pick for anything is just, we saw the downside to it this year, and I pointed out the Olave thing and all that, the scarcity of the position. It all makes sense. But again, if you're picking 10th, you could do what the Panthers did. You can get into that range of going up to go anywhere in the draft if you really want to do it. And when you are at that spot, you just have so much more flexibility. You're surrendering more than, even if you pick Chris Olave, say he's a year later and you pick him at 10, you've taken away the option of the evaluation. And that was the one thing that I hated the most about that trade. And I just don't know that they're in that position. So the answer to my question that I asked you, that apprehension for me is absolutely, because I'm not looking at it and saying, oh, well, that pick's going to be 20th or later.
If you knew, and I think the Saints operated last year as if they were trading the 18th pick in the 2023 draft.
No question.
And it ended up being the 10th pick. And so that was a miscalculation by them. But I don't mind. And it's funny, if you're for what they did, you call it the Olave trade. If you're against what you did, you call it the Penning trade. Like, in theory, it could have been either way. Like, they could have come away with one or the other last year. I don't mind the draft day trade they made to go up and get Olave.
I almost feel like that's flipped sometimes, too. It just really depends on the context of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're trying to downplay what they did, you're like, well, they just traded the pick to get Penning.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't mind the second part of what they did last year. So what did they go into the draft with, 16 and 19?
To clear that, Mickey talks about it as if they traded for Olave. So that's why I always say the Olave trade.
He keeps trying to justify it. Well, if they had
I don't know if it needs justification, though. I mean, Olave is a good player. He's a good player.
No, but what I'm saying is they could have just traded for Olave.
Yeah.
And never got Penning, and then had this year's 10th pick. Like,
All right, well, different topic, though. Like, if they don't make the move up for one of the top 2 guys in the draft, they pick at 10, would you rather have Derek Carr and Olave, or would you rather have whatever quarterback falls to 10 and some, non-good receiver?
Wait, you lost me. So
you just flip it. Like, so say Olave's in this draft.
Yeah.
And they're picking at 10.
Yeah.
And the options are Olave or the 5th quarterback or the 4th quarterback that falls to 10. Like, what would you rather have?
I got
So you got Olave.
We've already signed Derek Carr,
you got Olave.
We wouldn't have signed Derek Carr.
The options basically are: would you rather have Olave and Carr, or the 4th best quarterback in this draft and an average wide receiver?
Yeah, I don't think you get the 4th best quarterback in this draft at number 10. I think you have to move up to number 4, 5, 6, or 7 for that. So I don't think 10 was enough. Yeah, like before they signed Derek Carr, and we were talking about this theoretically, I mean, kudos to the Panthers. You saw what they did. They turned, was it the 9th pick in the draft into the 1st pick in the draft, and I might have been for that. But no, I wouldn't have wanted to just stay at 10 and taken whatever quarterback falls to me at 10. I don't think a quarterback's going 10th in this year's draft. I think the top 4 are going to go before 10th. And then I think that's too early for Hendon Hooker, as much as I sung his praises as someone you take a chance on last week. But what I was going to say about the second part of the Olave deal is they moved up from 16 to 11 to get Olave on draft day. I never mind that aggressive move. If somebody is so clearly high on your board, I don't mind the little added value to go get the guy you want. I didn't love the future first round pick part of it, but that wasn't, they didn't have to trade a future first rounder to get Olave. They could have moved up from 18 to 11 to get Olave without giving up
they'd be in hell at that position without him, though. They really would.
Yeah, so I like how aggressive they were in getting Olave. And I think part of the reason they wanted 2 first rounders is I think they knew by all means we need to get a receiver in this year's draft class, and I think they wanted him in particular. So I think they would have paid whatever it cost to get. And when you're doing that for a player, the Saints have done it a number of times over the years. I'm usually okay with that philosophy. I'm just very scared of a future first. That has not worked out that great.
If you don't get Olave, you're probably giving Odell that deal. And I think Odell's a good player. I think he's going to continue to be good, but I would much rather have the young player than Odell on a 1-year, $15 million deal coming off these injuries where he had to have workouts for the league and everything. They're just, if they didn't get him, it's such a bad position. It's sort of like pass rusher. Like it's just really, really impossible to kind of claw your way out of this. As far as Carolina, I like the position they're in. If they get quarterback right, I think that there's a chance. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at this division like, oh, it's the Saints to run away with. If Carolina gets a good quarterback who's ready to play, and I'll say this, based on, I think it's going to be Bryce Young. I think he's going to be number 1, though. I really do. I think Bryce Young is going to be the first pick in the draft. So I think he could come in and light it up. I think he's got a lot of skills.
We talked so many times about what the Saints' path should be at quarterback, and I think a lot of people love that path, and I think a lot of people are wishing they would tank this year and then go up and get Caleb Williams next year. I think it'll be harder next year. If Caleb Williams is all that, that first pick isn't going to be as easy to acquire as I think the first pick was this year. But the Colts hired an ESPN analyst, and they couldn't get the number 1 pick. they had an NFL countdown coaching their team, and they couldn't get the number 1 pick. But it also might be it also might be that there's not a ton of consensus. Like the Colts might want Anthony Richardson. They might be comfortable sitting at 4 or move up to 3, or remains to be seen. But
I've heard they're in the mix to try to move up.
Yeah.
So I think there's a chance that they
and obviously Young, Stroud. I think a lot of teams might have those guys in different orders on their board, and even Levis. Some people might have Levis in their top 1 or 2. So, but next year, if Caleb Williams is like one of those Andrew Luck.
Did you see the video of him, Levis putting mayo in his coffee?
No. He's off your board now.
I can't.
He's off my board.
I almost puked watching it. Like,
I can't.
Brandon, Jake, you guys drafting a guy that puts mayo in his coffee? Does that lower him on your board?
Definitely. Puts him in the gutter.
Jake?
Yep.
He's off the board?
Yep.
Just straight up, no conversation. That mayo hits, he's gone.
And man, Jake is a big coffee guy. Jake, tell him why you don't do that.
Yeah. Don't do it. It ruins the coffee.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's one of the nastiest things
I can't move on. I can't move on for the rest of the day.
I don't know if he was just like messing with people. Like they had him on there, like he's like squeezing it out. He mixes it in, and he's like just drinking the coffee. No grimace or nothing. I don't know. I wasn't okay with it. I was not okay with this.
I like to put like foofy flavors in my coffee. I want it to taste like hot chocolate, basically. Like I do drink coffee, but I need it to taste good. So every once in a while, there'll be a press box that has like no flavoring, whatever. It's just coffee. That's all you get. But if they've got a little ice cream machine, I'll put some vanilla ice cream in the coffee.
Yeah, that's not mayonnaise.
No, I know.
Like it's a dairy product that's like milk
mayonnaise
adjacent. Like if you
I'm not making it okay.
If you go to PJ's and get a drink, it's basically like you can get like a milkshake of it, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that's put some milk in there. That's fine. Like I think people like coffee and milk kind of go together, or ice cream kind of go together. But
I won't put mayonnaise on anything.
Mayonnaise is disgusting.
Yeah.
Ooh, this man is on well.
And this segment was brought to you by Hellman's.
What else we got?
Well,
I'm completely thrown off.
To finish my point, So a lot of people would like to see the Saints, like, as if there's a path to get up for Caleb Williams. If he's like an Andrew Luck type, people don't trade away that number one pick in that situation. So, but I admire what the Panthers did. I support it. I like, if you told me pick one lane or not, take the Panthers in their current state or the Saints in their current state, I'd probably take the Panthers, to be honest. I think they could compete and make things interesting this year. I'm picking the Saints to win the division this year. But I think currently, until we see what the Saints do with their picks and what they do with their picks next year, I think currently the Panthers look like they're set up for a little bit of a brighter future.
It depends. I don't know if I'm dead set convinced on any of these guys yet. I haven't studied any of them closely enough to really have a strong enough opinion to be like, this is the right way and this isn't. If the Saints were in that top 10 position, I would have probably much more conviction about somebody than I do now. Passively watching them, I'm not convinced that any of them. If I had to pick one, though, and this is going to end up probably being like a regretful statement at some point down the line, I think I would have to go with Stroud out of all of them. And I just feel like he has the best package of safe and upside. Bryce Young's downsides are significant. Richardson's downsides are significant. Levis's downsides beyond the mayonnaise are significant. Like, Stroud's the one guy that I feel like if you can get him to play like he did in the college football playoff, like where he's moving around and making things happen, like he is possibly a very, very good quarterback. The problem with him is he's been too stationary throughout his career. I think Bryce Young has like Drew Brees like accuracy and things like that, but the size is an issue, and Drew found a way to overcome it. That doesn't mean that everybody that's small is going to be able to play in the pocket and overcome it and be able to throw through windows and have that timing and anticipation. So, it's scary. None of them you look at and say, okay, this is a guy I want to bet my franchise on. But the Saints don't have that guy either, quarterback. They have a guy who's good, so it's tough. But if you told me that I could get a good young guy versus a good guy that's already on the next contract, obviously you take the young guy every time.
Yeah, it depends. As soon as these guys turn into real players, do we think the Patriots are set for the future because they have Mac Jones? No, we don't. Do we think the 49ers are set for the future because they have Trey Lance? No, we don't. Once they become a person,
that's worst case. Trey Lance is almost worst case scenario too.
I was just trying to think of recent draft classes. I'm trying to think of anyone else who went high.
But that's a similar deal though. They went up before knowing exactly who they were going to take. It was just like, we're going to take the quarterback.
And Mac Jones was the other guy they thought they were considering at the time too, based on most of the reports. So neither one of those guys would make you think, now we're going to win the division, for 8 of the next 10 years. So it really depends on the guy.
And Carolina could very easily get this wrong, and it sets you back multiple years because you get stuck in it then, and it's a new coaching staff. They're going to stick with them for 2-3 years probably. And if he doesn't work, now you're starting over and you gave up your draft assets. It's tough, man. It's a dangerous place to exist. It's a hard place to find your way out of. We've talked about that a lot.
But I think the Saints chose the other path I would choose. I would either choose go get
they couldn't go get though.
But what the Panthers did, or go get Derek Carr. I don't want to exist in the middle. I got online and I ripped somebody for giving like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a better offseason grade than the Saints this year, because the only thing Tampa Bay did this offseason was save future cap space. They still have no plan at quarterback. At some point, they are going to have to choose: do we trade up and get into the top 3 in the draft, or do we pay somebody like Derek Carr? So I guess they're saving future cap space, hoping another Derek Carr comes around eventually, and then somebody will give him a terrible grade for the offseason.
I'll say this too, like reading a lot of those grades, people that I don't believe watch the Saints very closely have a much higher opinion on Andy Dalton than I do. Like I don't see the Andy Dalton is Derek Carr thing. Like it's just go watch Derek Carr in the fourth quarter of games and watch him bring his team back, and go watch Andy Dalton in the fourth quarter of games that were within one score and tell me who it was. Also, if Andy Dalton got elevated by this system to the point where he had maybe one of the best 2 seasons of his career, maybe it stands to reason that you put a more talented quarterback in the same passing system and he'll have the same elevation too within it. So I just think that people look at it and they're like, well, did they really upgrade? Yes. Like you can't viably make this argument. I'm sorry. Like how much of a difference we'll see, but there is a difference between the quality of these 2 players, and it's just, I think people are overlooking the upgrade at quarterback.
I'll give Dalton a little more credit though. Like I have said over and over again, after watching them both in a pretty small sample size, I put Dalton and Teddy Bridgewater in similar categories, and I think Bridgewater got more credit
That's not-
and Dalton got less credit. But I am happy to pay an exorbitant amount of money to try to get into, even if it's just one tier higher, or depending on how many tiers you have, maybe they move tier two tiers higher. I think it's worth it at that position.
Yeah, well, that's not the question. Is he
Yeah.
with Teddy Bridgewater? Is he
Yeah.
in the same tier as Derek Carr?
Yeah. No, I'm saying, but what I'm saying is I'm not going to just say, I'm not going to throw Dalton out. I get it. You might have Derek Carr as your 14th best quarterback and Andy Dalton as your 24th best quarterback.
That's a
And maybe in the
significant
grand
difference.
scheme of things, that's not that far apart. But that position is important enough for me that I'm willing to, you got to, you got to pay an exorbitant fee to get to one or two.
I think going up 10 spots is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Going up 10 spots is probably two
Yeah.
wins in a season, and 2 wins in a season changes everything for a lot of teams.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
most teams are kind of packed in that middle. If you can go from 24 to 14, I don't think Andy Dalton's the 24th best quarterback in the league.
no,
though. I think he's like the
but
34th
I'm saying
best
even if
quarterback
that
in the league.
is the evaluation you came away with,
Yeah. I think they went up probably like 20 spots.
yeah, it's quite possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Andy Dalton, he was fine in the first 3 quarters of games. He was solid. He made good decisions. I don't know. I just think that there was maybe I think the view of him is different. Like, I think that he's getting more credit than he's should be getting credit for.
And here's the funnier thing.
And you know why? Because he had a good PFF grade. Now I understand how he got
Right.
the PFF grade, but like situationally, I don't know. I feel like Derek Carr's, he's paid what he's paid and he's tiered where he's tiered, and it's just, I think that the grading and the national people, they look at the PFF score, they look at the passing stats, the numbers, and it's just stripped of context. And you strip context from numbers, they're just numbers, and you make statements that I don't think are totally factually true. What else we got?
All right, well, let's zip through the roster because we made a good point, I think, on the members only. We made it a few times that we like the one deep on this roster. We think it's going to be competitive. We think it's probably one defensive lineman away from, I like the starting 22 on this team. But then the 2 deep, all of a sudden it makes every position feel like it should be in play for the draft because they're a year away from needing another linebacker. They're definitely a year away from needing another running back. They're a year away from needing at least 1 more guard, 2 guards or whatever. So let's zip through quickly the state of the roster. We've talked about defensive line a million times. Cam Jordan, 34 years old, 33 years old. Carl Granderson in an opportunity to get kind of a prove it type of year as maybe the projected starter this year, but I think he's only got 1 year left on his contract. Peyton Turner, we have no idea what he's going to be behind there. The 2 new defensive tackles they just signed, Tano Passanio. I mean, biggest must on the roster, both short-term and long-term, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Linebacker, how must in the draft? Must?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely must in the draft. They got to get must that they add somebody. I think must in the sense of they need somebody younger at that position. The Mario's clock is ticking. Regardless. Like I don't know that we've seen significant downturn. Going downhill, he's still elite. There was a couple things maybe with range that you started to look at it and say, well, when he first got here, he's making those plays, but I think his range is still on the upper echelon upper echelon of linebackers. So I don't think that there's an immediate concern, but the immediate concern is that Werner gets hurt every year, and he has, and DeMario's getting older. So I think getting a young player developmentally in that pipeline, that you can maybe start that transition of Werner becoming more of a leader. And I think we saw some of that last year when he wasn't playing. He was still studying film in the locker room, trying to show guys what he was seeing, trying to help everybody out. But obviously DeMario's like other, all world leadership. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think getting a younger player at that position is a must.
Yeah, I don't see that like I see the defensive line where, well, if you miss in the draft, then you go out and sign the 32-year-old in free agency, because then the guy would have like nothing to do unless there's an injury. Like that feels like even a draft need more than just to fill the position. And then Zach Bond being the wild card. I mean, it's his turn to have a Caden Ellis season. It really is.
If you miss, you do need a plug-and-play player because you have to prepare. It's almost like the Tron thing. And look, maybe Werner's healthy for the rest of his career, but you've seen it 2 years in a row now. So if he goes out, who's playing? Like,
it's true.
Even if it's just, I think you want somebody a little bit better than Chase Hansen, but I guess you could backstop it with a player of that caliber. I'm not there on Dowell yet. Maybe he's the surprise player of camp at that position. Hodges has developed players, and we've seen the development. So
it's got to be Bond. It's got to be Bond. He's got to be this year's Caden Ellis.
I'm not putting any money on Zach Bond.
All right.
Who was the preseason game again? Was it Green Bay? Was it Green Bay?
It was a monster.
I
was it Green Bay or was it? I think it was the first preseason game. Green Bay was.
I was convinced that the Zach Bond.
He did it 2 years in a row.
That one game though, man.
He had like one monster preseason game 2 years in a row, I think.
That one game though, man.
He was unbelievable.
It was Kobe on Jalen Rose.
Pete Werner's not going to be able to play this year. They're not going to be able to put him on the field. Corner. So you've got Adebo and Taylor fighting for the second spot opposite Marshawn Lattimore. You've got Bradley Roby, who I think they're still confident in, probably for one more year that you can feel safe about. Obviously, you could take corner in the first round and no one will complain. It's that important. But must, need, want, just a want? Is this the lowest priority of any of these positions?
I'll go want. I don't think they have to do anything there. I'd like to see another player maybe that could play nickel and compete with Roby there. But overall, I think they got a decent group. And then Adebo is really, really good depth. So I would say want. Definitely a want. Relative to other positions.
How high is safety? Is safety creeping into your top 3 or 4 needs? Like, do they have to get a safety in the draft?
Yeah, that's another one where I would maybe put it lower priority, but it's a strong desire, I think, more so than cornerback.
Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May are starting and playing almost every down when healthy. 2 older guys could get hurt. Marcus May could lose time to suspension. Who's third guy on the field?
I guess it's Lonnie. I think he would probably be the next guy there, depending on which one gets hurt. Abram, I think, is probably more of the dime player. So I think Lonnie's probably the guy that you insert into that role. So they kind of got a plan there to get through it if something happens. But I would very much like it if they got a young player in that pipeline to develop.
Yeah. All right. Offensive line. Guards, we've said it. Andrews Pete's heading into the last year of his deal. Cesar Ruiz, if they're not going to pay that 5th-year option, I bet they work out a contract with him. I'm going to pretend like Cesar Ruiz is on this roster beyond this year.
No offense to Cesar. I think a lot of his development, I think he got really good. You just can't pay him $14 million.
No, you can't. But I bet he's on this team beyond this season. But you're eventually replacing Andrews Pete. I guess James Hurst is your rotating first guy as a backup guard or a backup tackle. Calvin Throckmorton's a backup guard. But do you have to get your future Andrews Pete replacement in this year's draft class?
I don't think you have to, but if they took one at 29 or 40, I would defend the move. I would think I would actually think it was prudent.
Tackle's a little tougher. In theory, Penning and Ramczyk should be good enough. With Hurst and Storm Norton as possible backups, among others, Landon Young still in the pipeline. In theory, if those guys could stay healthy, a tackle will never see the field. So is that a wasted pick early in the draft, or is it in play?
I think just kind of seeing how Ramczyk's health has gone over the years gives me a little bit of a, they could definitely do this, and maybe it would be sneaky smart a little bit, without it being on the immediate horizon.
It would put a clock on. Well, I mean, Penning would have to stay healthy, but if Penning got healthy, it'd put a clock on Ramczyk.
At the same time, though, it would be disappointing if they could draft a tackle and it ends up being something that they needed to do, So, but yeah, I wouldn't bash it, and if they did it, it would maybe signal something to me that okay, these things that you're seeing that you've quietly kind of been like, man, this is starting to get to be something. This guy can't practice on Wednesdays anymore. What's going on? Why is he on the injury report every week? It would signal to me that there is significant concern about it, and at that point, I would have to defer to kind of the tea leaves that we're seeing. So if they make the pick, they're telling us that they need to make the pick.
Running back.
Is my take on that wrong?
If they make the pick, it would. But I don't think they go into the draft that way. I don't think they say we have to draft an offensive tackle.
No. But if they took one like at 29, it would say kind of like, well, there's a clock on.
We
this.
put a clock on Ryan Ramczyk.
Yeah,
they are putting. Yeah, if they think the value is so great, if they're like, well, this guy was 15th on our board, just like what Ramczyk was, they sped up Zach Strief's clock because they saw the value in Ramczyk.
Strief was
different. He was a year away from retirement. Yeah. But it was not a pressing need at the time. The day they made that pick, it was, all right, Zach, this is your last season.
Like Ramczyk should theoretically have 5 really, 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 really good years left in the tank. And if they'd make that pick, and obviously Penning has 15, So if they were to make that pick, it would just tell me that they don't think that there is 5 years. They're saying there's 2, and the value here is something that we should have took.
Yes and no. I think they'll stick with Ramczyk, but if they find a cheaper, better alternative, then that makes their future easy. Then they put a clock on Ramczyk, and they're like, well, we're going to stop paying $15 million a year for this position now because we have the rookies. So not a must, but that's why it would be. Running back is a must to me. Like, and in the draft, for the same reasons we were kind of talking about at linebacker. Yeah, we talked about this on the members only. In theory, if you want more running backs because Alvin might get suspended, you could go out and re-sign Mark Ingram. You could sign if somebody like Leonard Fournette or some unsigned running back is still cheaper, you can fill that position. But the two guys right now, Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, are both 28 years old. I want the young running back. I think there's no better value in the middle rounds of the draft than there is in a third or fourth or even fifth round running backs sometimes. You know, Mickey Loomis said their plan was to draft one each of the last 2 years, and it never materialized. Make it materialize this year.
Yeah, I'm like I've said before. I'm trying to get my replacement. I'm trying to get the next guy. I'm approaching this draft as if I need to get someone that can elevate into that number one role within 2 years. Sort of like it was in 17. It wasn't the end of Mark Ingram, but you had the elite sidekick, the elite duo, and then eventually it just shifted. Like that's what I'm trying to set up here. Like I'm trying to get someone to come in and be Batman that you or Robin that can become Batman in a couple of years. So I think you got to take the same exact approach.
And I genuinely think there is no other position we're talking about where you can find your future Batman. Except running back. You can. You can find a future stud in the third and fourth round. You really can. I think the value's there. Wide receiver, though, much tougher. I think we would be fine with them taking a receiver in round one, and we'd be fine with them not taking one at all in the draft.
Yeah, that's just opportunity. Let opportunity dictate it. It's an extremely valuable position if you like someone, take them. But if they don't get one, there's a reality where they're okay going through. But one way or another, though, I would strongly. So
let's put tight end. Yeah,
I would strongly want
one
them
or
to get,
the other
to get another playmaker on offense.
What meaning wide receiver or tight end?
Yeah, but it's a want.
Yeah.
It's a want. It's not.
You don't think they have to get one or the other in this year's draft?
I think it's a want, but I mean, because I don't feel that the outcome of the season teeters on getting one of those guys. So that's kind of where. But I think it's something that they need to try.
That's one where
they need to make their best effort to make it happen.
Let's combine tight end, because tight end is pass catching, but it's also blocking. I think you're eventually going to replace Adam Troutman unless he finally has his fourth year breakout. That one is in play as early as round one to me. But I would say if they don't get a wide receiver or tight end in the draft, that is a position where they dip back into free agency in May.
I agree
there's
with that.
one body missing.
I agree with that.
And basically that body might be Michael Thomas insurance too, or a slot receiver.
They got Brian Edwards for that.
Or a slot receiver. And then quarterback, we talked about this a lot. It's certainly not a must.
If the opportunity is there.
If the opportunity is there, and it's all the positions, right?
It's all the positions.
Kicker, punter, you draft one?
If the right guy's there, I mean, sure. If you can get your 10-year answer in the draft, sure, I'm okay with it. I wouldn't love it, but sure. I mean, when you have stability at that position, it's it's worth it. Yeah,
nice.
Like if you drafted, like Morstead ends up being that's good value. If you draft the Baltimore kicker, that's there's no complaints about that in hindsight. So
I'd take the next Justin Tucker in this year's draft.
Sure, absolutely.
I'd take that in round
round
6.
But like you draft that guy and like people are mad about it.
No, you're right.
But years later you look back, oh okay, like that was smart. But if you do what Tampa did and you miss, like you're the dumbest people in the world. So it's a very results oriented business.
All right, so I just went through the entire roster and thought, okay, how does it look in the short term and the long term? What feeling did that give you about the state of the Saints roster right now?
I still feel like you kind of set the variance point at 9
wins.
The variance point at 9, and if a lot of things, health and everything else go right, you can tilt it by 2, and if too many things go wrong, you can tilt it by 2. I kind of feel like 9,
7 to 11.
And I feel like that's usually how NFL teams are. There's usually that variance point, and it's kind of like a tilt, a 2-win variance either way. I like the schedule. I like where things set up, but there's a handful of things where there's legitimate pressure points here that I think that they need to build a little bit of a wall around by getting deeper.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely on your 2023 take. I think I'm a little more nervous than you about the future of this team. But maybe we're 3 draft picks away from me feeling a little different about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Miss Cleo,
Yeah.
man. I can't see the future.
I know.
I'm just doing
But-
what's on the plate right now. I like some of the pieces I have for the future, but so much of it is I think the whole optimism for the future is contingent on Derek Carr and how he performs.
Very fair.
Yeah, I mean, if
Very
Carr's
fair.
good,
The other 52, there were years where it was Drew Brees and the other 52 didn't matter. If you have your quarterback,
yeah.
yeah.
He's never going to be Derek Carr in the Pips like Drew was Drew in the Pips in like 15 or whatever. But like, I think if he's good though, there's definitely more. If he goes through this season and he's a top 10, let's just say 10th, the 10th best quarterback in the league, I think everything you're looking at in 24 it's easier. There's not a full exhale, but a little bit of a, and you feel okay about maybe some of the things you got to do. It doesn't feel unmanageable. And I think that's everything. Everything is going to be kind of based on how he does this year.
Yeah, it would also be nice not to go into next year's draft being like the Saints need to use 2 first-rounders to get the 3rd best quarterback in this year's draft class. Like,
Yeah.
It's nice when you're not doing that.
Even little things like if Pete Werner has a fully healthy season, I think that changes the look at linebacker. But Lante Taylor ends up being as good as we think he can be. I mean, that changes things on your defense significantly. So there's just a lot of ifs still, but I think it's really quarterback dependent. I mean, that's just the league.
Yeah. I think it's nice to be one of the halves for sure.
You know what our halves? The people that are signed up to NewOrleans.Football. So make sure you do that. Use the code DRAFTSEASON23, 20% off your first payment. Members only pod end of the week. Mock draft coming Wednesday or Thursday. It's supposed to be Thursday, but I get too excited about the work we do and publish it a day early. So whatever I say, really don't listen to it. But,
I knew it when we turned in that draft. I was like, Nick's got this in his hands by Wednesday at noon. There's no way he's waiting to get published. I
can't let the people wait. But that's all we got for you guys. Thanks for listening to the show.